So I'm glad Brent asked the question, how many of you are new, because I did a what is crowdsourced placemaking presentation last year. And so I'm going to do that part a little shorter and get into more of like, how is this actually applied in the real world, which I think is a lot more interesting. So the question is, what is crowdsourced placemaking? And it starts with the triple bottom line. And if a show of hands, who knows what triple bottom line means? Okay. So triple bottom line means people, planet, profit. It means you're being economically, socially, environmentally responsible, sustainable, beneficial. And so that's essentially what we're starting with when we're doing crowdsourced placemaking. And in a nutshell, crowdsourced placemaking is sourcing a triple bottom line crowd and making a triple bottom line place that people are passionate about, that people love. And that's how we get crowdsourced placemaking. So that's what this presentation is about. So I'm going to use these icons to represent crowdsourced placemaking from here on out. And so how will triple bottom line crowdsourced placemaking benefit communities? And so let's look at this graph. So this is a common economy in many cities and towns. People on the left, this is basically a graph of all your residents in the community and the dollars leaving your economy. And on the left, it's people who say drive a lot, spend all their money at chains, basically, just spending a lot of their money where the dollars are leaving the local economy. And then there are people on the right who want to drive less, buy at local restaurants and shops, but it's still, there's still the lack of choice, for shopping is still like largely national, and they still have to drive around. So there's only so much money they can keep in the local economy, and there's still a lot of money that's leaving the city. So here's on the left, you got your driving a lot, Starbucks, Walmart, 3 cars, and on the right, you have maybe 1 car, shopping at local restaurants. And so these are people who drive a lot versus the people who drive less and spend locally. And the thing is they don't really have a choice. So what happens if this trend continues? Then you have even more chains coming in, more gas stations, more parking lots, and this is a standard pattern you've seen in the last 30, 40 years. And so what's the alternative is the big question. And this is what crowdsourced placemaking is all about. It's, here's your local economy looking at it from a triple bottom line trend. This is where people are walking, biking, shopping at local businesses, local agriculture, which Brent is a major contributor to here. And it's basically less dollars leaving your local economy. So if you look at the green area now, this represents the dollars that are no longer leaving, but new dollars staying in your local economy. As you can see, there's less, and as long as you're biking, walking, shopping locally, that's dollars that are not leaving the economy, they're staying. So all that new green area you see is, excuse the transfer of slides there, that is crowdsourced placemaking. And that green area represents all the new dollars in your local economy that weren't there before. They're now there because you now have a triple bottom line approach. So this is what CSPM Group is all about, which we sort of created since it was last year. So the big question now is, how does this apply in the real world? And there's a group called Renaissance Downtowns. It's a real estate developer in New York that's committed $6 billion worth of real estate development to using this methodology. So the big question is, why did they do that? And I'll show you a graph here. This is the 20th century public process for large-scale revitalization. Standard notion of like the same sort of a kind of graph I was showing you before. You have influence on the y-axis, participants on the x-axis, and you can see most of the power and influence is in very few people and very little bit in this little short tail in the yellow. So that's known as the big head in the red. And these community activists typically are the only ones who are sort of part of this planning process. They're known as the, I guess in this image, they're the short tail. So their image, their sort of methodology of evening the playing field is basically showing up public hearings using megaphones, shouting a lot, got to get their voice heard to even up the level of influence. And of course, that basically lawsuits and sort of advocacies and protests is their sort of methodology. But in the end, what happens is there's overall less influence and even less people interested in being part of change in the community, and therefore you have even less change and even more arguments and more debates. So let's look at a different model where if you apply what you just heard from Chris Allen and use some of the social media and sort of this new ability to get everyone involved on an individual level with more influence, you had this, if that's sort of the community group in the 20th century, if you apply the social media tools and you sort of water that crowd, they're going to grow into something known as the several hundreds of millions of people on Facebook and Twitter, starting revolutions, making massive amounts of change all across the world. And so how does this get applied to large-scale revitalization in your city? So this is what it actually looks like. The yellow is now known as the long tail. And there's actually a great book by Chris Anderson called The Long Tail that basically shows in one graph what the internet is. Before the internet, just the red. After the internet, now you have this long tail. And that sum in the yellow is much larger than the big head. So how do we take this long tail, and now that we sort of apply it to community planning, these activists now become community members. You become sort of a triple bottom line, cohesive crowd that's working together with shared interests to make change happen. So we took that triple bottom line methodology and applied it to placemaking, and recognizing that that yellow area is what is known as the crowd that's crowdsourced. This is what is crowdsourced placemaking. So let's see how this applies in the actual bricks and mortar world, literally. With the big head, what's focused on typically money, power, influence, you get, not surprisingly, power centers. Strip malls, shopping malls, subdivisions, all geared around these sort of what they call the 19 conventional types of finance that really only build 19 types of developments, and that's all you see. That's one of them. So now if you take the triple bottom line approach and apply everyone else, you get tons of ideas. So these are actually ideas from a real site in Bristol that we're doing. And those ideas get winnowed down, and they start liking these ideas. As Chris Allen also said, liking builds relationships. So these likes turn into shared interests, and they start advocating for things together as a community. And the top ideas, as you can see, it's a, well, as you can't see, it's a piazza, a bookstore, performing arts center, and a river walk. And so the piazza was by far the most popular idea, and people really advocated for that. So then people focused on that. And then over time, these, the people who are participants now become investors, and you're now working instead with influence, you're working with investment. So you're taking on a whole new level of engagement here, where just interest becomes capital. So now what happens, once you sort of get that momentum going, you'll have a local business open because you have all this momentum. They'll say, well, you know, I heard a brew pub was a really popular idea, so I'm going to open that brew pub. And in Bristol, Connecticut, where we're doing this, that's what happened. And then bookstore sort of event center opened. And then people said, let's do a big event. And an event they planned last year to attract 2,000 people, attracted 15,000 people. And then they had a second one 2 months ago that attracted 20,000 people. And these are all like preview events for what would life be like with a downtown piazza. And then as you can see over time, it happens so subtly that the vision of the big head starts to become the same as the long tail, because why wouldn't they want to invest what everyone else is investing in? So it happens so subtly that, you know, suddenly everyone's working together. So the two images are the same. And then once you get the long tail working with the big head, then you're unstoppable. You're attracting new companies, you're attracting people from big cities who want to live in your small town because you guys have the amenities and excitement of like making change happen that maybe in their big city they don't. And that essentially becomes the impetus to make a vision a built reality. And so that's what crowdsourced placemaking is all about. And I'm going to go quickly through some examples of some real places. So this is a real community. Bristol Rising is the name of this social community in Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN is based. They started off in late 2010, and they now have 2,200 members. And the focus right now is, this is just right off the site right now, interested in living in the new downtown Bristol. The residents are all working together to get letters of intent for people to sign on and commit to living in the downtown if and when new housing is built. And in the meantime, as I was showing you with the graph, they just opened a new brew pub, or sort of micro craft beer restaurant a month ago, and that downtown really had nothing, and this has almost overnight become sort of the third place, the sort of destination place to be in downtown that they didn't have, and that all came about from this effort. Another thing, a block away from this downtown area, which is basically a empty shopping mall site, there was a drug-ridden neighborhood that no one would walk through at night at all, and over time in the last year, it's been transformed into a clean street, safe place, people moving there, and it's become a very desired neighborhood, and people are ever grateful for this whole level of effort that's being provided. So that's the vision. That's the vision of that the Bristol group came in, and the developer is working on the specific engineering drawings for this right now. In Long Island, there's a group called Sources Station, and that one just started a couple months ago. It's 400 people, and it was when we first started this one, everyone's very apprehensive because there's a lot of dissension in the community, and I think when you bring people together with shared interests and you make everything transparent, it builds a lot of trust that you're not doing anything behind closed doors and that you really have their interests in mind because you're actually putting that up on the site. And as you can see, click here to support every idea you'd like. Likes are at the heart of what crowdsourced placemaking is, because as I've said and Chris has said, likes build relationships. So this is another project in Hempstead, New York. This is what we call a business mob, where every month people vote or like ideas of what they'd like to see a local business have to attract new generations of customers, whether it be trivia night or a local food night. This one was a simple, just a special fixed price menu night. And so people came and supported the business. This was just last week, very successful. And here's another idea. This is another project in Nashua, New Hampshire, where people said, hey, there's something called Parking Day, where we can crowdsource parking spaces into what we'd like them to be if you could have that for a day. And so here's a parking space on their main street that they turned into a sort of park. And so these are the kinds of things that are enabling people to work on the grand scale, as you saw with a piazza, can take years, to something that could take a week, and demonstrate the kinds of places on both levels of what people would like to see. So the quick question here was, what about small cities? So this is Hilo. This is my hometown, actually, in Hawaii. And they started off last year, 40, 50,000 people. In a few months, they had over 400 people as members and submitting ideas, liking ideas. And the most popular ideas, the city basically said we're going to do a feasibility study to see how possible this is. And they've already had 3 or 4 landscaping projects as a result. And even one of the ideas for a Bayfront Trails has turned into a nonprofit and raising money that way. And so it really has been a tool for attracting funds to actually implement these ideas. And then, as Brent mentioned, Envision Roanoke, I was here last year, and in the conversations on the second day before I presented, we thought, well, why don't we build a platform for Roanoke to submit ideas themselves? And so we got that done that day and launched it the next day. And when I went on stage, I basically presented the homepage without any ideas because it had just started. But now I can present, I think, 300 or 400 people. And the cool thing about this is you see that third one where it says pedestrian-only plaza. So that was submitted the day after the conference last year. It's been one of the most popular ideas ever since. And Lucas Thornton is going to present this tomorrow. But that they were already thinking about this, so a lot of credit goes to them. But when they sort of saw this popularity of this idea, they said, now's a good time as any to actually really get this ball rolling. There's a lot of support for this. So they're now working with the city on getting funding, and they've actually made a lot of progress on that to actually turn that plaza out there into more of a pedestrian-oriented and permanent place for farmers markets and events. And you can see that if you go to Envision Roanoke and go to the Implement tab, you'll see the progress page for all the events that happened day by day, of like what day the idea was submitted, what day it reached 50 likes, what day Lucas and them, the team started having these meetings to discuss this, all the way to some of the very high-end meetings they're having now about getting capital from with the city. So, and here's a quick vision that's posted in the front there of this effort. And then Brent's also got another project, building in Grandin Village, which has its own page of ideas. So if you go again to the Implement tab on Envision Roanoke, and you'll see Grandin Village. All these ideas are ideas associated with Grandin Village, and people are talking about, discussing, sharing ideas about what they should do with this Grandin Village building that's there that CityWorks has control of and doesn't know what to do with just yet. So all in all, the bottom line is, as you can see with the pattern here, it's all about recognizing Times Person of the Year 2006, that each one of you liking ideas, having conversations, is really the way that we're going to make change happen. So, thank you very much.